This is a Lamborghini Centenario, and it is the ultimate modern Lamborghini. It has 760 horsepower. It'll do 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. It has a price tag of just under $3 million, and Lamborghini built just 20 of these for the entire world. And today, I'm going to review this one. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online enthusiast car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. If you're looking to buy a cool car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids has amazing variety with daily auctions running all the time. If you're looking to sell a cool car from the modern era, Cars and Bids is the place you will get the most interest and the most money for your cool car. Check it out at carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this Centenario from Lamborghini Newport Beach. Lamborghini Newport Beach is, of course, the Lamborghini dealership here in Newport Beach in Southern California. They have an amazing selection of new and pre-owned Lamborghinis, everything you could possibly want, including the Centenario, the only one for sale in North America at this moment. Of course, that isn't surprising because this is an incredibly rare car. Lamborghini made just 40 of these for the whole world, 20 coupes and 20 roadsters like this one. It's called the Centenario because it was made to celebrate the 100th birthday, or the centennial, of Ferruccio Lamborghini, Lamborghini's founder. And it's essentially an ultra-rare evolution of the Aventador, which is expected to be replaced soon. In fact, this is kind of a Lamborghini thing. When the Murcielago was nearing replacement, Lamborghini came out with the Reventone, which was an insanely limited production car that previewed the look and the technology in the Aventador, which came next. Now that the Aventador is coming to an end, Lamborghini has given us this, the Centenario, which I suspect also previews the look and the tech of the Aventador replacement. And what a preview it is. 760 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds, and a production run so limited I've literally never seen one of these before right now, and I suspect I never will again. But today, I'm going to review it. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of the Centenario and show you all of the quirks and features of the ultimate modern Lamborghini. Then, I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, which I'm nervous about, and then I'll give it a Doug score. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Centenario with its most obvious feature, and that would be its styling. Now, like I said, I think this previews the next generation Lamborghini, the replacement for the Aventador. And I say this because Lamborghini did this before. They had the Murcielago, and at the end of its run, they did a very short production of the Reventone, which previewed what the Aventador ended up looking like. Now, they've done the same thing here at the end of the Aventador run. And I have to say, if this really does preview the next generation Lambo V12, I'm into it. I like it. I think this is a really cool looking car. Very striking, very special, and very bold. Precisely what you would want from a Lamborghini. It's a crazy, crazy design, but it fits perfectly with Lamborghini's image. But beyond the overall styling of this car, I want to point out a few interesting quirks and features on the outside, starting right here with this giant air intake. Absolutely massive, very obvious visual item when you look at the car, and you can see there's this like stair step of carbon fiber in front of it, and then air passes through and goes into the engine. You need a lot of air to get into this engine, and this air intake provides it. And next up, we have to talk rear diffuser because it is absolutely gigantic. There are a few large things in the back of this car, but the diffuser is undoubtedly the largest. In fact, this is the largest rear diffuser ever installed on a production car. And you can tell just by looking at it, that seems pretty obviously true. It's massive. It basically takes up the entire rear of the car. No bumpers back here, no big space for a license plate, no grille, just a huge diffuser. But like I said, that isn't the only large thing back here. You also have the exhaust. Below the diffuser in the middle, you have a triple center exhaust. Looks very cool, very large compared to, well, normal cars. And of course, it makes a pretty cool sound. Take a listen. Ah yes, the sound of $3 million revving its engine. Now, the other rather large item back here is the brake light situation and the turn signal. You can see the assembly is very large, and indeed, when you put on the turn signal, it lights up the entire assembly. From the corner of the car all the way pretty far towards the middle, it all lights up. This is the largest rear diffuser on a car. I have to guess that it's also probably one of the largest turn signals, at least on a modern car. Quite surprising to see them so massive, but they do look cool with their sort of thin turn signal line. And it's the same story in front. Again, a cool turn signal look, distinctive from the standard Aventador. It looks nice. It will turn heads if people like to watch turn signals, and it's neat to see. Now, Lamborghini agrees that this lighting is pretty cool, and in fact, they are quite proud of it. And I say that because in the back, you can see it says Lamborghini Light Design, printed rather large in each tail light turn signal assembly, and in the front, it says the same thing, Lamborghini Light Design. So all of the exterior lights remind you that it was Lamborghini who designed them, just in case, you know, you were looking and you were wondering. And next up on the side of the Centenario, I want to talk wheels. I absolutely love the look of these wheels. The spokes have sort of this half carbon fiber look and carbon fiber around the center. And I just think they look really cool without being like too much or too showy or too aggressive. It's a really cool wheel design, and I like the carbon fiber integrated into there. Another cool thing I like on the side is the Centenario badge, which you can see here behind the front window. Centenario with the Italian flag below it, but the coolest part is the little bull horns on the C and the O, the outside letters, so it looks a little like a bull. That is nice attention to detail and a reminder of Lamborghini's bull-oriented heritage. By the way, while I'm in this vicinity, I should mention that this car does not have a roof. And I don't mean it doesn't have one installed right now and it's in some box somewhere. I mean, it doesn't offer one. It's not available. There are no mounting points where you would latch it. It simply doesn't come with a roof from the factory. So you don't want to drive this car if a rainstorm is in the forecast. This is very much a Southern California focused car. Nice sunny days. Any sort of weather, you might get nervous about driving your $3 million roofless supercar. But anyway, on the outside, pretty much the only thing I don't like on this car is the white lettering on the tires. This is a new fad you see in like the tuner world, and I'm surprised that Lamborghini did it. It says P0 and Pirelli with little white lines. And strangely, even though these are Pirelli P0 tires, there was no attempt made to put the white P0 over the part on the tire that actually says P0. So it just doesn't really look all that good, and frankly, it kind of cheapens the outside of this car. My one complaint in terms of styling and design. Actually, that isn't quite the only thing I don't like on the outside of this car, but the next one is a little bit more functional. To get to it, I'm going to talk door opening. Now, to open the door in the Centenario, you put your hand into this little gap here, and there's an electronic door popper. You just pull it, and of course, it opens up a scissor door like a true Lamborghini. And you can see with the door open, it just looks cool. Exactly the drama you would expect from this vehicle. But you might be thinking, well, what if the battery dies? How do you open an electronic popper door if there's no electronics? And that leads us to the other thing I don't like on the outside of this car, this little panel here behind the door. It just sits there. And it turns out if you want to open the door manually, you put something in the back of this panel, this little hole, you pop off the panel, and then there is a manual door release in there so you can get inside the car. But when it's not in use, it just sort of sits there being an extra panel on the outside of this car. Doesn't really look all that good, especially for something you're probably rarely going to use. Kind of a shame that they had to do it like that. And next up, when you climb inside, the first thing you want to do is close the door, which is kind of interesting. To do so, there's no big door pull integrated into the door panel. Instead, you just pull this loop, which you can see is the same color as the exterior, which is a pretty cool little touch. Anyway, just pull it and it closes the door right up, no problem. Now, also on the door panel, you can see another item there is this storage pocket, which isn't your typical door storage pocket because it has holes in it, and it's Alcantara, and it has blue exterior color stitching. It is a lightweight, special storage pocket, precisely what you'd expect from a vehicle like this. But anyway, aside from the door and the door panel, the first thing you really notice when you climb inside this car is the seats, which are pretty tight. You can see well-bolstered sport seats designed to keep you in place in corners, and they have this really cool stitching pattern on them, this blue stitching, exterior matching, that kind of points forward. Each little item in the pattern goes a little bit further forward in the car. That's pretty cool. Also worth noting, the floor continues this pattern. You can see you have these kind of arrow-looking things pointing forward on the floor. No floor mats in this vehicle, just a flat floor with that little design on it, I guess to save weight, and because you get a car like this, you don't need luxuries such as floor mats. And next up, another noticeable item inside the Centenario. I mentioned earlier that this car probably previews the styling of the successor to the Aventador, but it also previews the technology. This was true with the Reventone as well, and it's certainly true here. For one thing, you have a giant center screen, which is much larger than what you get in the Aventador, and it's a touch screen, which is a big upgrade over the Aventador's like button and dial controlled screen. Very outdated, much improved in this car. And in fact, Lamborghini has already brought this screen from the Centenario into the updated Huracan, and I'm sure it will go through the whole model range soon. That isn't the only new technology that this car features, though. There's some cool aerodynamic stuff that's pretty technical, but one of my favorite features is the fact that this is the first Lamborghini ever to offer four-wheel steering. And when you drive it around in the gauge cluster screen, it shows you which wheels are turning and approximately how much. So you can always monitor your four-wheel steering system and see it working. And I have to say, for making a U-turn on the street, this four-wheel steering system works well in tight spaces and helps to neutralize the rather large size of this vehicle compared to other supercars. But this car isn't so technologically advanced that it gets rid of all the old school Lamborghini charm that made you say, what were the Italians thinking? In fact, there are still quite a few examples of that in here. You want to get out of this car? Well, there's no door handle on the door panel itself. Instead, the door handle is next to the seat, kind of on the door sill. And to use it, you push the plastic part in front and then pull up on the little silver part behind it, and that's how you release the door in this car. Very unusual, very unorthodox for a door handle. And next up, another Lamborghini weirdness quirk. Take a look at the steering wheel. You can see behind it you have these large shift paddles, so it makes sense that over on the left side Lamborghini puts the turn signal stalk a little bit lower so you don't accidentally bump your finger on the shift paddle when you're going for the signal stalk. Makes sense. But over on the right side you can see they haven't done the same thing with the wiper stalk, and it is very much in bump your finger territory. Now, why wouldn't Lamborghini just make this uniform? The stalk on the left, the stalk on the right in the same position. It seems like it makes sense, but they haven't done it because, well, it's Lamborghini. And next up, here's another Lamborghini, what were they thinking? The climate controls, you can see in the middle, you have a dial and various different buttons. When you turn the dial to adjust the temperature, it tells you the temperature you're changing to in the driver's gauge cluster area, not on the giant screen directly above the climate controls that the passenger can also see. No, that would be too logical. So if the passenger wants to change the temperature, they have to adjust the dial, then kind of look into the gauge cluster, see what it says in there. Typical Lamborghini. And next up, here's another typical Lamborghini item, the badge that signifies this vehicle as one of 20 Centenario Roadsters. is not in the middle or on the dashboard or anywhere you can see it when you're sitting in the car. Instead, it's mounted behind this little window in the front so that people can look at the badge when you park the car. Because it's not as important to flex to your passengers that you have a 1 of 20 car. No, you can just explain that to them. It's important to flex when you park the car. And so Lamborghini places the badge there. Hey, at least they know their customers pretty well. But anyway, beyond the weird Lambo quirks, I'm going to show you around the rest of this interior, starting in the center with the drive modes. You can see they're labeled Strada, Sport, and Corsa. That would be Street, Sport, and Race. And you press these little arrow buttons on the end to switch between the drive modes, depending on what mode you want to be in. Now, right below that, you have a button labeled R. That is to put the car in reverse. To change the other gears, you just use the shift pedals. Over on the other side, you have an M button. Press that, and it puts the car in manual mode, so you can use the paddles or just pull one of the paddles and you're automatically in manual mode. Your last important item in here is under this red cover where you have the start-stop button. Flip up the cover, press the button, and the car roars to life. Now, below all that stuff, pretty standard buttons down here, parking brake, couple of USBs, but you also have this little button that has kind of a strange diagram on it. What does that do? You press it and it raises the rear spoiler. Now, the rear spoiler also automatically goes up and down as you drive, depending on what speeds you're hitting, but if you want to manually raise it up to attract even more eyes to this car, as if that was possible, then you can do it yourself by pushing that button. And by the way, here is what the wing looks like when it's raised up. You can see it really just looks like a raised wing. For as much craziness as this car has on the outside, the inside, the cost of this car, the wing is just fairly standard. Nothing too crazy here. But speaking of things raising up, it is worth noting this car has an axle lifter system, like a lot of supercars. You press this little button in the center and then the front of the car raises up so you can clear steep driveways, whatever, without worrying about scraping. That's an especially important point in this car because it has a very low front splitter, which is part of the cool aerodynamic system debuting in the Centenario. The drawback of this system, though, very low in the front, very long, so this front axle lifter is a pretty important feature. And next up, I want to move into the infotainment system for a minute, since this was a brand new system when it first came out in the Centenario, and it has a few cool features. For instance, you go into car display, and it will show you when you're driving where the aerodynamic load is on the car. I guess there are sensors that can actually tell you, depending on your speed and where the wind is, exactly where the air is flowing throughout the car. That is a pretty cool feature. Haven't seen that one before in anything else. And next up, even though this is an ultra crazy fast supercar with no carpeting and 760 horsepower and it's insanely focused, it has the internet in this infotainment system. You can go on your favorite websites right here in the infotainment system in your Lamborghini Centenario. And next up, one other cool feature in here is the telemetry feature, which allows you to record your racetrack laps and then play them back later. A lot of cars have this, not that unusual, and there's a dash cam mounted facing out the windshield that will record when you're on the track, and so you can really watch, did you hit that apex, where were you in that corner, that sort of thing. That's not that surprising, but one very special feature, this car also has a camera between the seats. You can see it mounted there, kind of facing a little bit toward the driver. This allows you to check like your handwork when you're on the racetrack, what gear you are down or upshifting into, and sort of see out at the same time. So there are two separate cameras, including one that lets you literally monitor your driving from inside the car. That's pretty cool. And next up, speaking of seeing things in this car, the rear visibility is absolutely atrocious. You have a pretty normal sized mirror, but look into it, you can't see out the back. You're basically looking through these little slats in the engine cover, and that is not enough room to see anything back there. I think it's kind of funny that this car, with its two forward-facing cameras to let you know precisely how you're driving on the track, you can't know anything that's happening behind you. But then again, in a car with this much power, maybe behind you doesn't really matter all that much. And finally, before I climb back out of the Centenario, I want to talk about the gauge cluster screen, which is pretty cool. Has a neat look to it, although it is fixed. It doesn't change. Even when you go into the different drive modes, you can see nothing is really changing in here, but it is cool in its fixed state with its giant tachometer display and its G-forces display, and everything just looks exciting and special in there. And finally, we move back outside of the Centenario to discuss the front trunk situation, which is abysmal in terms of storage space. Incredibly small front trunk, one of the very smallest, and Lamborghini has made it even more challenging to use as storage space by sticking this bar right in the top through the middle. So anything you maybe could have gotten in there before with this bar in place, now you can't get it in there. It's like they're trying to make the car less practical, and succeeding. Actually, I think this bar is there for regulations. The government says that if your trunk is a certain size, you have to put in an emergency trunk release on the inside in case you kidnap someone. But some supercars get around that regulation by putting a bar through the center to split up the size of the trunk so they don't have to put in the emergency trunk release. And I think that's what's happening here. But the crazy part is just how small it is under here. The Aventador's trunk is double this size, and you can see it takes up this entire front area, but in the Centenario, no, a much smaller trunk. I'm sure there is a functional reason for it, but it makes the car just that much less practical. Kind of funny to see it. Now, unfortunately, this is the last thing I can open in this car because I can't access the engine, or at least I can't do it very easily. You can see this little keyhole on the top of the engine cover. There's one on the other side too. You have to unlock those, and then you can begin the process of opening up the engine cover. It's just a little bit difficult, but you can see the engine through the glass in back, and well, what you can see looks very, very cool. But they definitely go to some lengths to make sure you can't easily get back there unless you are qualified to be pawing around in your Centenario engine bay. And so those are the quirks and features of the Lamborghini Centenario. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the famous Centenario. This car is just quite incredible. It's a little bit intimidating, honestly. You get in and you know what it's worth, and you know how rare it is, and you know if you crash it, you're gonna be part of history. You know, I don't want to crash any car I review, but Aventador is replaceable. There's a bunch of them. This thing, so you got to be really careful, and I'm a little nervous every time I drive something really high value. So you get in this, the very first thing you realize when you start to drive it, especially at low speeds, is you have the transmission is slow. This is a concern about the Aventador as well. This has always been kind of a reality of this generation of car. Because the Aventador came out so early, it had, you know, the old school kind of single clutch transmission. It has been refined and it feels faster than it ever has, but it's not as fast as a dual clutch like what you get in a Huracan. And I suspect they'll refine it, give it a dual clutch for the next generation of this car. I will say the sense of occasion in this car is quite something. That's one thing the Aventador has always done incredibly well. The Centenario takes it up to a whole new level. It just looks insane in here. You know, you sit in a Ferrari 812, you could forget that you're in a really special car. In this car, there is no forgetting. You look around and it's like, this is the coolest thing that has ever existed. You have the matching blue all throughout this interior. The whole interior is made in a bizarre way to match the exterior with all the different angles and buttons and controls. This is just a crazy car inside and out. And I often get into cars that are crazy on the outside, but the inside doesn't really match. This isn't that. Surprisingly tame at a stoplight. You know, Lamborghini, when I think of Lamborghini flagship model, I think of very raucous, very loud Diablo Countach. But this car, at least at the stoplight, it actually feels, you know, reasonably acceptable. Not that I would say that this is something you'd want to drive every day. See behind you in this car. Everybody always makes fun of me when I accelerate like that. I look for cops. I have no idea. Their visibility is atrocious. It's just part of the fun of having an impractical Lamborghini. But I don't know anything about what's behind me. Man, the acceleration is unbelievable. The sound is unbelievable. The exhaust backfire, truly impressive. Oh, listen to that. This is just cool. And you know, the sad thing about this car, they built 40 of these. It's obviously a collector car, already worth more than it initially was. Nobody's gonna drive it like that. The people who buy this car are gonna get it, they're gonna do that twice, and they're gonna sock it away and earn money on it. Which, you know, that's a viable strategy. But it's just sad that the car will never really, no one's ever really going to use this at its full capacity, because it seems to have quite a capacity. You can tell that it changes directions very quickly. One of my complaints about this platform has always been it's a big, heavy car, which it is, compared to basically anything else. And the transmission makes it feel even a little bit bigger and heavier because it's just not immediate enough. But it still changes directions incredibly fast. The steering wheel, I mean, you pull it in an instant, the car is going in a different place, which is impressive given the car's size and heft. It really neutralizes its size, frankly. One thing that's always been interesting about this car, the windshield frame really comes low. So if you're tall, you can't see stoplights at all. But there is an impracticality to driving a V12 mid-engine Lambo. And there's less of one than there used to be. I mean, I reviewed the Countach, it's a ridiculous car. It's so impractical. This still has some of that built in though, and Lambo calls that character, and it really is. You don't want the car to be perfect. That's not the point of this. You want to suffer a little because it has to be less accessible than a normal person just gets in and drives it. That's part of what makes it cool. The Huracan is for the people who just want a Lambo. This thing is on a different plane. The downshifts are unbelievable, and when you downshift, you can hear a little bit of air getting sucked in. Listen to that. It's amazing, it's quite a sound. The car is remarkably stable. You know, another thing you don't really associate the Lambos with, and sort of, you know, the flagship V12, you think Diablo, it gets away from you, it's squirrely. Not this car. Even the Murcielago was a little bit kind of challenging. This car feels stable and good, and like you could drive at high speeds without realizing it, which I've just done. Lambo doesn't want you to daily drive this, that's the thing. Everybody always asks in these videos, well, can you drive it every day? That's not the purpose, especially this car. You want it to be a special occasion thing that is very, very unusual and special, so that when you do get in it, you have that amazing experience every time. Sitting in this car at a stoplight, you do feel a little nervous with other cars around. They have no clue. Here in Newport Beach, Orange County, Southern California, you see Lambos on the road all the time, and people are like, oh, just another Lambo. Well, they don't realize that if their foot slips off the accelerator, they're looking at an insurance claim that exceeds the value of their policy. But I know that, and so I'm terrified. I'm sitting in traffic next to a Corolla. That's one of the things ultimately that keeps people from driving these. They have to be pristine in order to maintain their value very well. And every time you take it out, you're nervous. Even if you have $1 zillion, you don't want to get, you know, destroy the car and mess it up. There's only 40 of these. This car is so cool. I just think it's one of the most special modern Lambos, and I'm hopeful that it does preview the next generation, because it really looks cool, and the interior is cool, and the tech is cool. And if this is the future of Lambo, then it's a future I'm ready for. I would say my only complaint would be, let's get the transmission improved to a dual clutch and kind of join all the other modern supercars. And so that's the Lamborghini Centenario. Almost $3 million, just 40 units built, 20 in each body style. The Lamborghini that makes other Lamborghinis seem as common as a Honda Civic. If you want power and performance and standout styling, you get an Aventador. If you want the ultimate modern Lamborghini, you get this. And now it's time to give the Centenario a Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, I love the Centenario. I think it's surprisingly gorgeous and distinct from the Aventador, given the Aventador base, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds, and it gets a 10 out of 10. Handling is sharp, but this is a bit too heavy and a bit too big for a perfect score, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Fun factor is huge, about as good as it gets, and it gets a 10 out of 10. Cool factor is also huge. These are insanely rare and insanely special, and it gets a 10 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 48 out of 50. Not many cars ever get that close to a perfect score. Next up are the daily categories and features. This car is about normal for modern exotics and it gets a 6 out of 10. Comfort is also about normal for modern exotics and it gets a 3 out of 10. Quality is good, it's very nice inside and everything feels well made and it gets a 7 out of 10. Practicality is insanely low. Not only does it have virtually no cargo space and only 2 seats, but it has no roof and you'd be afraid to take it anywhere because it costs $3 million and it gets a 1 out of 10. Finally, value, and this is a tough one. It's an ultra-rare, ultra-special exotic car, so it makes sense to be expensive, but $3 million. It's big money, so it gets an average 5 out of 10 for a total daily score of 22 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 70 out of 100, which puts it here against other modern supercars at similar price points, plus other modern Lamborghinis. The Centenario ties the Aventador, no surprise since that's what it's based on. The Centenario does a little better in weekend categories with better styling and a higher cool factor, but the Aventador gains those points back in daily scores. Overall, the Centenario does well, but its biggest benefit is low production numbers and special styling. This is certainly a very unique Lamborghini. And so that's the Lamborghini Centenario. Blah. What else is there? And I suspect I never will again. Ha. Hey! Hi! Oh, you're so cute. You're the cutest dog ever.
He's half Irish setter, half golden retriever.
Oh, what a combo! Hi.
And I drove the 911 out to Indiana to pick him up.
Oh, no way. That's awesome. No floor mats in this vehicle, just